Chapter 1. The Review. It started with a closed door. Ryan never closed his office door unless someone was about to cry, get fired, or be coached into improvement. He liked to keep things performative. Loud laughter with clients, fake humility with upper management. But when I walked in for my annual review and heard that quiet click behind me, I knew I was walking into something else entirely. He didn't ask me to sit, just started reading from a printout, eyes flicking over the page like he was skimming a menu he didn't plan to order from. "Camille," he said, dragging out the vowels, "you've had a steady year." I sat anyway. Steady? He leaned back in his chair like he was giving me room to talk, but we both knew he wasn't listening. "You're reliable. Clients like you. But there's a difference between someone who supports a business and someone who builds one." My pulse tapped against my collarbone, slow but rising. I knew what this was. Not a review, a controlled burn. He continued, "I need builders, leaders, not just doers." I blinked. Did the numbers change? Because last I checked, I closed more business than anyone else on the team last quarter. Ryan smiled in that infuriating way that didn't reach his eyes. "We're not just looking at numbers, Camille. We're looking at potential." I bit the inside of my cheek, hard. "And what exactly do you see?" He shrugged. "You're a good support system. You know the accounts, but we're scaling. And when we bring in real rainmakers, I want to make sure you're aligned with your lane." I almost laughed. Aligned with my lane. Ryan had built his entire management style on subtle degradation. He never raised his voice. He just quietly moved people out of the room and made sure they didn't know it was happening until the door was already shut behind them. I looked at the printout he'd half hidden under his elbow. I caught the bold header, "Retention Plan Mid-Level Roles," and a client list I recognized as my own. He saw me looking, covered it with a coffee mug. "Anyway, you should take this as a vote of confidence. We're investing in people like you, people who stay in their lane." I stood up slowly. "Thanks for the clarity, Ryan." "Happy to help," he said, already turning back to his screen. "But here's the thing about me. I don't stay in lanes. I build exits. And that day, I quietly started mapping mine." Chapter 2. You're lucky to be here. The next morning, Ryan called an all-hands meeting at 8:45 sharp. 15 minutes before the hour, like always, so no one could accuse him of wasting billable time. People filed in with half-sipped coffees and forced smiles, dragging their chairs into the long, narrow conference room we called the runway. Ryan liked it that way. Liked watching us line up on either side of the table, while he stood at the head like the showrunner. "Morning, everyone," he said, adjusting his cufflinks like he was preparing for a TED Talk. "Let's get into it. Q3's creeping in fast, and our growth trajectory's plateaued. I want to see some urgency." He launched into numbers, client churn, attrition risk, terms he used to stir anxiety while pretending it was motivation. Most of the team nodded along, scribbling in their branded notebooks. I'd learned not to bother. Then with zero warning, he turned. "Camille, why don't you walk us through the Parker brief?" The room stilled. I blinked. I wasn't looped in on Parker this week. Ryan raised his eyebrows like I'd confessed something shameful. "Really? That's odd. They specifically requested you on the expansion proposal." He paused, letting the implications sink in. I didn't flinch. "I'd be happy to catch up with them this afternoon and put together a summary. Shouldn't take long." Ryan smirked like I'd just proven something for him. "Good. I want you to think about how you're showing up, Camille. Proactive partnership. That's what gets noticed." It wasn't feedback. It was a warning shot, delivered with a smile and a spreadsheet. After the meeting broke, I stayed seated a beat longer than the rest, just long enough to hear the tail end of Ryan whispering to Jared, one of the newer hires. "She's decent, but she plateaus fast, needs direction. Otherwise, support staff energy." It wasn't the first time I'd overheard something like that, but this time, it didn't sting. It sharpened me. Out in the hallway, Jessie from HR fell into step beside me. "Hey," she said gently. "You handled that well." "Handled what?" "The stunt in there." I gave her a look. Jessie sighed, lowering her voice. He's been doing it a lot lately, setting people up, making them feel small so he can play savior. HR doesn't have an issue with that. She looked at the floor. He's been here 12 years. You haven't. It was meant to be empathy, but it came out as a warning. I nodded and walked back to my desk, each step quieter than the last. Ryan thought he was the sun, that people orbited him, that I should be grateful for the sliver of light he allowed me. But what he didn't realize was that I had already learned to grow in the dark, and I had no intention of staying there much longer. Chapter 3: The Client List. By Thursday, something felt off. Not loud or obvious, just subtle shifts, like the temperature of the room had dropped a few degrees and no one was saying anything. First, my access to the CRM changed. I logged in that morning and noticed a banner across the top, permission level updated by admin. Half my clients' folders now required special authorization, the kind I used to have automatically. At first, I thought it was a glitch. I sent a quick message to IT. Hey, my folder access changed. Looks like I'd been downgraded. An hour later, a response pinged back. Access modified per director-level request. Please reach out to your manager for further clarification. Director-level request. Ryan. I walked down to his office and knocked lightly on the open door. He didn't look up. Everything okay? I'm locked out of several accounts I've been handling. He tapped his pen on the desk, like he was pretending to process this. We're just doing some restructuring, he said casually, consolidating client ownership to create clearer hierarchies. And I wasn't notified? He looked up then, smiled like I'd asked a silly question. You were. It was in last week's meeting notes. I knew it wasn't. I reviewed every set of meeting notes religiously. He folded his hands together like he was giving a TED Talk. Camille, you've been doing great with onboarding and support, but some of those top-tier accounts need more strategic leadership. There it was again, strategic, a word he used like a velvet rope. Only certain people were allowed past it. And who's taking over? I asked, even though I already knew. Ryan leaned back in his chair. We're trialing a new hybrid model. Some accounts will move to Jared. Jared, the junior, the one who had to Google what a renewal contract was 3 weeks ago. I nodded once and left without another word. But that afternoon, I pulled a list. Every client I'd ever onboarded, supported, or salvaged. Every project I'd led. Every late-night presentation I'd rewritten because Ryan wanted a more polished tone. And every relationship I'd nurtured until they asked for me by name. I wasn't just watching my workload shrink. I was watching them carve me out of my own legacy, and if they were already preparing for life without me, they had no idea how ready I was to return the favor. Chapter 4, Quiet Exit Plan. I didn't rage quit. I didn't cry in the stairwell or launch a dramatic Slack message at 1 a.m., or even tell my closest friends what was brewing. I just got quiet, the kind of quiet that makes people nervous, the kind that signals calculation, not defeat. Ryan thought I was winding down, letting go. He'd already reassigned half my portfolio and made Jared the client liaison for 3 of the top accounts I'd spent years cultivating. He didn't even hide it anymore. I was being replaced in real time, softly, subtly, but methodically. And I let him, because sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's a setup. Every evening after work, I stayed an hour later, not to impress anyone, but to build. I combed through old email chains and backed up key communications onto a private encrypted drive. Not forwarded, not uploaded to the cloud. Printed, labeled, tucked into a slim leather binder I kept in a reusable grocery bag under my passenger seat. I pulled call notes I'd personally written, proposal decks I'd designed, revision logs that proved I wasn't just a support player like Ryan liked to say. I was the one doing the damn heavy lifting. I reviewed my onboarding documents, that ancient NDA we'd all signed in bulk during a benefits webinar. It had no teeth, no clear non-solicit clause, just a vague confidentiality paragraph and a single signature block. Sloppy. I made an appointment with Nora Green, a referral from a friend of a friend. She ran a boutique firm downtown and didn't blink when I laid it all out. You're being iced out, she said plainly, folding her hands. Classic displacement strategy. They weaken your position until leaving seems like your idea. Except I'm not leaving empty-handed. Nora smiled, sharp and measured. That's why I like you. Let's talk mitigation and exposure. We spent 3 hours reviewing paperwork. She gave me phrases to avoid, timelines to consider, and email phrasing that would keep me legally insulated if things escalated. The next day, I filed for an LLC under a name I'd tested for SEO invisibility. I registered a neutral domain, set up a VoIP number, created a fresh, professional Gmail account with no tie to my personal identity. Every detail was chosen for one purpose: stealth. At the office, I smiled more, laughed when Ryan made offhand jokes about Jared stepping up. I complimented Jesse's shoes, brought in pastries on Fridays, played the long game. And when no one was watching, I ordered a new set of business cards, sleek, minimalist, and printed in soft gray ink. They said, Camille Torres, Principal Consultant, because I wasn't just planning an exit. I was preparing a takeover. Chapter 5, After Hours. The office always felt different after 6. The noise faded. The performative energy disappeared. No Ryan pacing by the windows, pretending to take important calls. No Jared loudly dropping buzzwords to sound important. Just silence. And me. That's when I started digging. It wasn't dramatic. No hacking into private files or slipping USB drives into drawers. Just quiet, methodical clicks. I knew where everything lived because I'd built half the internal systems myself. Training guides, shared folders, naming conventions that made sense to no one but me. They called me obsessive. I called it organized power. I started with my client files, ones I'd nurtured from lukewarm leads into multi-year partnerships. I pulled original onboarding emails, the initial pain points, and every solution I'd crafted. And then I compared those to current files. Something didn't line up. Several of my accounts had been reassigned, but no one had told the clients. Ryan had quietly transferred contract ownership behind the scenes. The new account managers hadn't even reached out. One of the folders still had my name listed on the contact card. That was mistake number 1. Next, I reviewed service logs. At least 4 clients were still operating on outdated project scopes. They were paying for deliverables we no longer offered, without their knowledge. A few had even asked about updates, only to be met with templated brush-offs from Jared's team. Mistake number 2. Then I checked billing. That's where it got interesting. One of our highest-grossing clients, Devon Sharp at Camille Ventures, had emailed Ryan personally 3 weeks ago. Just checking in, was hoping Camille could loop us in on the renewal incentives we discussed last year. No response, just a forwarded email to Jared with the note, "Handle this. She doesn't need to know." Mistake number 3. I printed the email and added it to my binder. By the end of the week, I had a portfolio of quiet infractions and broken promises. Not company secrets, just client neglect that could sink the whole ship if exposed in the right context. I wasn't creating problems. I was cataloging them. Because when I left, I wasn't planning to just take my clients. I was going to show them why staying was no longer an option. Chapter 6, NDA Games. It started with an email marked HR Update, Please Review, sent at 4:41 p.m. on a Friday. Classic move. The attachment looked like a routine acknowledgement form. Updated employee handbook, they said. Nothing major. A few compliance tweaks. But I've learned that in corporate speak, compliance tweaks usually translate to "let's cover our ass before you realize we're setting you up." I opened the document. Paragraph 4 was new. A broad confidentiality clause, reworded to include client relationships, prospective partnerships, and any information deemed proprietary at the discretion of company leadership. At their discretion. No timeline, no scope, no definitions. They were trying to retroactively leash me. I stared at the screen, heartbeat slow and steady. Then I clicked Download, saved a local copy, and sent it to Nora with the subject line, "You were right." She called me 10 minutes later. "They're scared," she said, not even bothering with hello. "This is panic paper. They're laying groundwork to claim ownership over the relationships you built. Can they enforce it? Only if you sign it." I didn't. Instead, I walked into HR on Monday with the form in hand and a perfectly neutral expression. Jesse looked up, visibly relieved I wasn't storming in. "Oh, hi Camille, did you get a chance to?" I did, and I have some questions. We went to a private room. I sat across from her and laid the document flat between us. Did legal draft this? She hesitated. It came from corporate. So, no. She didn't answer, but her silence was loud. I leaned in. I'd like the original NDA from my file, the one I signed when I joined. And if this, I tapped the new document, is meant to replace it, I'd like that outlined in writing with dates and attorney sign-off. Jessie shifted in her seat. This isn't punitive, just a standard update. Then you won't mind putting that in writing too. She didn't respond right away, just said she'd loop in leadership. By the time I left her office, the air around me had shifted. They knew I knew. And the thing about companies like this, they never expected the quiet ones to lawyer up. They just expect us to sign. But I wasn't signing anything that tried to take credit for what I built. And if Ryan wanted a war over who owned what, he was about to learn exactly how much I had already taken with me. Chapter 7, The Pitch. The next step wasn't legal. It was personal. Because no matter how many folders I backed up or clauses I dodged, none of it would matter if I walked out alone. This kind of exit only works if someone walks with you. And I didn't need all the clients, just the right ones. So I started with Devin Sharp. He was one of our biggest accounts. Complex contract, high maintenance expectations, but steady. We had history. I'd been his go-to for 3 years, ever since I talked him down from pulling the plug on a botched rollout Ryan had promised we could handle. We couldn't, but I could, and I did. We were scheduled for a quarterly review. One Ryan had tried to delegate twice. Let Jared stretch his legs, he'd said. I told him Devin and I had already prepped together and it would be cleaner if I ran it. Ryan rolled his eyes, but let it go. I logged into the call 2 minutes early. Devin showed up 5 minutes late, in a hoodie and winded, like he'd just finished sprinting across the city. Camille, he said, settling into his chair. Thank God it's you. Thought they were sticking me with that new guy. Still here, I smiled. For now. He raised an eyebrow. For now? I didn't say anything. Just let the silence hang. Devin narrowed his eyes. You thinking of jumping? Devin, I said carefully, if you had the option to work with someone who knew your business, anticipated your roadblocks, and didn't disappear mid-cycle, would you take it? He didn't blink. Every time. I gave a small nod. That's all I needed to know. We spent the next hour reviewing progress, highlighting wins, and gently flagging gaps in delivery. Gaps he had already noticed. I offered to follow up with some additional resources, which I had already queued in a new shared folder, one he'd soon receive from a different email address. After the call, I sent a thank you note. Polite, professional. And I signed it with something new. Camille Torres, Principal Consultant. The next day, I set up similar check-ins with 2 more clients. One was already irritated by delayed feedback loops. The other had emailed 3 times with no response. I listened, validated, took notes, and before each call ended, I offered the same sentence, neutral, polished, but deliberate. If anything about my role changes, I'll be in touch directly. You'll never be left in the dark. Not a promise, a warning. Breadcrumbs, quietly scattered. And behind the scenes, the path was already forming. Chapter 8, Countdown. There's a moment in every plan where fantasy stops and timing takes over. For me, it was a Tuesday night at 11:17 p.m. Staring at a color-coded spreadsheet, the cursor blinking beside the words launch, T-5 days, I had the shell company, the domain, the documents, the pitch deck, the clients prepped, quietly, subtly, but now came the part that most people get wrong, the actual leave. You can't tip your hand too early. Can't give them a single excuse to call you emotional, unstable, or worse, disloyal. You have to make it look like you walked away, not that you ran. So I mapped it down to the hour. Step 1. Finish out the week without deviation. Stay consistent. Be visible, but not loud. Deliverables submitted early. Meetings attended with notes. Keep the facade. Step 2. Transfer final client materials under the guise of backup redundancy. Ryan liked when we mirrored projects to the cloud. He called it business continuity. I made sure all files I touched had a mirrored copy, with updated dates and timestamps that led straight back to me. Step 3. Friday night, 11:59 p.m. Resignation email, pre-scheduled to send. No dramatics. just a clean break. But the real break wasn't the email. It was the outreach that followed. I had a launch message written for each client, personalized, precise, and timed to hit their inboxes at 8:02 a.m. Monday morning. Not a second earlier, not a second later. Each message came from my new domain, each one framed as an opportunity, not a rebellion. I'd even set up an intake form for referrals, because I knew how this would spread. People talk, and nothing gets people talking like a clean, graceful exit wrapped in professionalism, especially when the company you left behind is still trying to figure out what happened. Nora called to review the timeline one last time. "You ready?" she asked. I glanced down at my screen. Every row was green, every trigger in place. I've never been more ready. Because the thing Ryan never understood, it wasn't about burning bridges. It was about building one he'd never be allowed to cross. Chapter 9, The Night Shift. I didn't even pack a box. No desk plants, no farewell cupcakes, no tearful goodbyes at the elevator. Just one last login, one last cleanup pass, and a folder labeled handoff dropped in the shared drive like a parting gift I didn't owe. It was Friday, 11:21 p.m. The office was dark except for the blue glow of my monitor and the low hum of the building's HVAC system kicking on like it always did after hours. Familiar, mechanical, impersonal, perfect. I opened the scheduling software and hovered over the final email. Subject line, Notice of Resignation. Ryan Wolf, CC, HR Jesse Lee. Timestamp, Monday, 7:59 a.m. Attachment, Transition Memo plus Asset Summary. The message was short, 3 lines. Ryan, effective immediately, I'm resigning from my position. All relevant project materials are included in the attached transition folder. Thank you for the opportunity. Camille polite. Chilling, unapologetic. No explanation, no apology. Just exit velocity. I checked my client messages next. Each one personalized. Each one framed as continuity, not rebellion. Excited to continue our work through a new venture, I'd written. You deserve consistent, strategic support. That's what I plan to deliver. At 11:46 p.m., I powered down my computer for the last time. Not because I had to, because it felt right. Ritualistic, like closing the final page of a book I'd outgrown. I left my badge on my desk, face up, no note, no flourish. Then I walked out. No one saw me leave. That was the point. But by the time they realized I was gone, it would already be too late. Because when Ryan opened his inbox on Monday morning, he'd find the notice. When he scrambled to call Devin, he'd find the voicemail. And when he checked the CRM, he'd see the drop-off. Not a crash, just silence. And then disappearances. 1 account, then 2, then 5. It wouldn't feel like an exodus at first, just a little air leaving the room, until suddenly the entire building was gasping. And I'd be elsewhere, already breathing easy. Chapter 10. Ryan's wake-up call. It hit him at 8:04 a.m. The timing was almost poetic. Ryan liked to start his Mondays with a full inbox clear-out, bragging to the team about how efficient he was, while sipping overpriced cold brew in his corner office. I knew the rhythm. I'd been part of it for too long. So when he opened my resignation email, timestamped just before his first sip, the world shifted under him. He read it twice. 3 lines. No emotion, no room to argue. By 8:08, he buzzed Jessie from HR. She didn't say anything? No heads up? No warning? Jessie blinked from the doorway, holding a printed copy of my email like it might self-destruct. I thought you knew. You've been transitioning her clients. Ryan's face darkened. That was a test, a development plan. He was spiraling already. At 8:11, he called Devin Sharp, straight to voicemail. At 8:14, he tried again. No answer. Then the call log began to build. 4 clients, then 6, each one suddenly unavailable. One forwarded him to their assistant, who left a message that Devin would be transitioning service providers. That's when panic settled in, because Ryan wasn't just losing a staff member, he was losing control. He stormed into the bullpen around 8:30, trying to sound composed. Hey, has anyone heard from Camille? Her calendar's gone. Jared shrugged. She sent a note this morning, said she was pivoting. Ryan's eye twitched. Pivoting to what? Didn't say. What Jared didn't add, because even he had started to figure it out, was that clients had begun to talk. Devon had already emailed 3 industry colleagues with the name of my new consultancy. My launch site had gone live at 8:01. It was clean, sharp, and already filled with client testimonials I'd secured before I ever walked out the door. By 9 a.m., Ryan was pacing. By 10 a.m., Ryan was pacing. He was on a call with legal, asking whether anything I'd done was actionable. It wasn't. No contracts breached, no NDAs violated. Just quiet, deliberate preparation, and a truth he couldn't escape. The person he thought wasn't smart enough to leave had left so precisely, so surgically, that by the time he looked up, he was standing in an office full of names, with no loyalty attached to any of them. Chapter 11. The narrative flip. By Tuesday, the story had already shifted. Not mine, his. Ryan started damage control the way insecure men in power always do, with spin. He told the execs I'd left impulsively, that I'd been overwhelmed, that I wasn't cut out for high-stakes clients and had likely burned out trying to prove something. She needed structure, he said in a leadership huddle. We gave her that. She chose chaos. He didn't know I had someone in that meeting, Alan Rivera, a former colleague who left last year after a similar transition plan, chipped away at his title and his clients until he finally walked, quietly, with receipts. Alan had joined my firm as an advisor. He called me after the meeting. He's rattled. He's rewriting history so fast he's losing the plot. Let him, I said. Every version makes him look more unhinged. Because while Ryan was flailing, I was building. My firm launched Monday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, we had 6 contracts signed and 3 more pending. All former clients. All of them reached out to me. Not because I begged, because I listened. And because when Ryan tried to downplay the mass exodus, they didn't buy it. Not when they compared notes, not when they realized how many of them had been forgotten, ignored, or handed off without warning. Even better, some of those clients started posting on LinkedIn. Thrilled to partner with Camille Torres Consulting, finally a team that gets it. Camille was the reason we stayed as long as we did. Now we get to work with her directly. The comments were full of praise, and not one of them mentioned the firm Ryan still clung to like a sinking ship. By Thursday, internal Slack messages were leaking. Jared had been reassigned to strategy development. Jesse had gone quiet, and a few remaining clients were now asking point-blank in emails, where did Camille go, and how do we follow? The narrative was no longer his. It belonged to every client who had ever been ignored, every woman who had ever been told to stay in her lane, every quiet professional who had built something extraordinary under someone who refused to see it. And this was just the beginning. Chapter 12, Reclaiming the Power. By the following week, I was fully booked, not just with client work, but press requests, interview invites, and DMs from women in similar trenches asking, how did you pull this off? I didn't answer right away, because this wasn't about going viral. It wasn't about applause. It was about something quieter, more personal, reclamation. One afternoon, a former colleague forwarded me an internal company memo Ryan had sent out, titled Maintaining Professional Continuity in the Face of Disruption. A full page of wordy excuses, gaslight dressed in corporate jargon. My favorite line? While certain recent transitions may seem sudden, our leadership team remains committed to excellence and client satisfaction. Translation: we're bleeding, but we'll pretend it's fashion. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The clients were already talking. The industry was already watching. But one day, I did decide to speak. Not in anger, in truth. I wrote a LinkedIn article. Just one. When Quiet Contributors Walk, a lesson in listening. I didn't name names. I didn't throw grenades. I simply outlined what it felt like to be consistently overlooked while doing the work that held the machine together. I wrote about the subtle ways power is hoarded and the damage done when leadership confuses proximity with value. I wrote, sometimes we don't leave because we're angry. We leave because we finally believe ourselves. And once that happens, there's no going back. Within 48 hours, the post had over 12,000 shares. I received messages from executives, recruiters, and even a few former mentors, people who admitted they'd underestimated me too. But the best message came from someone unexpected. Jessie. She sent me a short email. I read your post. I'm sorry I didn't say more when I could have. You were never invisible to me, just boxed in. Thank you for showing us what breaking out looks like. I stared at her words for a long time, because maybe that's what real power is, not shouting, not destroying, just walking away intact, with your integrity, your clients, and your story. Finally yours. Epilogue, Camille uninterrupted. 3 months later, I stood at the front of a packed breakout room at a national leadership summit. The sign behind me read, "Redefining Retention, when loyalty is a one-way street." I hadn't planned on becoming a speaker. But after the article, the firm, the quiet dominoes that fell in perfect order, the invitations came, one after another. Panels, podcasts, corporate workshops asking me to explain what I'd done, how I'd pulled off what so many only dream about. But I wasn't there to sell a fantasy. I was there to show the math. Most companies don't lose talent overnight, I told the room. They drain it slowly, through doubt, through minimization, through silence. And then when the quiet ones leave, they act surprised. A few people nodded. One woman in the second row wiped her eyes. I walked them through the framework I'd built, not just the strategy, but the psychology, how small dismissals add up, how systems reward volume over value, how leaving doesn't have to be loud to be final. After the session, 2 executives approached me with cards. Another woman pulled me aside to say, "I've got my plan halfway built. I just needed to know it was possible." I smiled and said the same thing I always do now. It's more than possible. It's predictable. Once you stop waiting for permission. That night, I poured a glass of wine in my new apartment overlooking the city skyline. My firm had grown to 5 employees. Alan was officially on payroll. Nora had become our de facto legal lead. And Devin? Still my favorite client. As for Ryan, I'd heard through the grapevine he'd been reassigned. Something about retention numbers, morale, brand erosion. Apparently, even his charm had an expiration date. His message came 2 weeks after my firm's second client feature in Forbes Women in Business. The subject line read, "Could we talk?" Inside, the body was short. Typical Ryan, still trying to sound composed, even with everything slipping. "Camille, I've been reflecting a lot on how things ended. I know we didn't always see eye to eye, but I hope you know I always respected your work, even if I didn't say it enough. What you've built is impressive. If you're open to a conversation sometime, let me know. Ryan." I read it once, didn't laugh, didn't seethe, just closed it, and then archived it without replying. Because the truth is, I didn't need his acknowledgement. Not anymore. I didn't need a seat at his table. I built my own, with integrity, with strategy, with people who saw my value the first time. Because this was just the beginning.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all, you're in the right place. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new savage ending. Because around here, karma always hits different.